quite a few nights a year I would have a nightmare. And the nightmare was that my father and my mother were going to die. And I was pretty much traumatized by those nightmares because I believed that they were true. But I knew deep within my heart that one day my mum would die. My dad would die. I would die. And that frightened me because I couldn't come to an acceptance of death. Death frightened me because I couldn't imagine ceasing to exist. What's the point of life? What's the point? I remember stopping at this one moment and looking up at the church, which was in the distance. And I said to myself, one day I want to be like Jesus. It's only now that looking back, I understand that that was really the first stirring of a vocation, even though I didn't know what it meant. I wanted to be like Jesus. Once I finished Year 12, I went to university. And my dad said, look, I don't think you can do university. Don't trouble yourself. You know, you can't get a degree. You're not like everyone else. And it was true. You know, I wasn't as smart as my other two brothers and sister. But I thought, no, I'm going to go to university. And I tried. And after 4 months, I dropped out. And my parents said to me, look, we told you, you're no good at study. It's not for you. Why don't you listen to us? My name is Father Aurelio Fragapane. It took me 19 years to finally become a priest since the initial moment of my conversion. Before I was about to drop out in the religion class, one of the Christian brothers made us listen to an audio tape of a priest talking about his story of how he became a priest and his work as a priest. And he spoke about the prodigal son and about prayer. And I thought to myself, this priest knows God, but I don't know God. And if he knows God, then perhaps I can get to know God. And so I started listening to those tapes over and over and over again. And finally, I actually finished Year 12, and I saw myself as the prodigal son because even though I hadn't done anything wrong, I didn't go to Mass on Sundays. See, my parents would always bring me to the country or to the beach on a Sunday. We'd go to picnics. And I guess for me, that's how I encountered God, through nature. And so I did have, I guess, an awareness of God's existence. But I felt that God was very distant, that he wasn't interested, and that we couldn't have a personal relationship with him. I attended a retreat in Whittlesea, not far from Melbourne. And as I was arriving to this camp place, Christian camp, I was told that it was charismatic. And I had heard the word charismatic and I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? I don't want to be here with these charismatics. Because I'd heard that they're a little bit strange. And anyway, I was stuck there. And two things happened on that retreat that really changed my life. The first thing was we had a moment of prayer where there were some candles and there was this gold thing on a little table. And I said to the person next to me, I said, what is that? Because I really felt there was something sacred and special about this thing. And she turned to me and whispered, that is Jesus in the Eucharist. I don't know what happened to me, but immediately I believed that that was God. That Eucharist, that bread, is truly the body of Christ. And, looking back, that's how I wanted to capture God in my hands. And as a priest every day, I capture God in my hands. I consecrate this bread and this wine, and I give it to the people of God. It was from that moment I said, if this is truly God, this mystery is too big, it's too amazing. I have to devote my life to this mystery of the Eucharist. I have to become a priest. There were people praying over people, and there were mattresses on the ground, and people were falling onto these mattresses. And I thought to myself, I'll never do that. That's ridiculous. It's all show. But there was something stirring within me, and I thought, no, I have to just go and see. And so I asked the lady, I said, what's this all about? And she said to me, well, when you were baptized, your parents made the decision for you. Now, you can accept that decision of baptism. You can accept Jesus into your life. And she asked me, have you accepted Jesus as your personal Savior? I said, no. She said, would you like to? I said, okay. And so I repeated a prayer after her, and I gave my life to Christ. I surrendered my life. I said that I would no longer live for myself, but I would live for Him who died for me. Next thing I knew, I fell down in the Spirit. They call it being slayed in the Spirit. I was down for about 20 minutes. And I remember that it was the only time I felt peace in my life. I really felt close to God. There was something that had happened. Perhaps a blockage, perhaps this openness to God. God flooded my life with His love. And then finally, when I did come up, I felt that I had to become a priest. So I decided to drop out of university. And my parents really thought I was crazy, that someone had brainwashed me, and that they didn't go to church. My dad hadn't been for 60 years. He'd always talk against the priests and against the church. And then within about 3 years or 2 years of questioning me, they too returned to the church. It was about 2 weeks after that retreat that I remember praising God in the shower, just singing. And I started to speak in tongues. This babbling, you don't have the words to express your love for God, that it comes out like a babbling. And it just wouldn't stop. And it was a gift that I'd heard about, but I didn't want it. And it's something that has really transformed my life. For someone who was going to drop out of Year 12, I know that it's not me, that it's truly God who has called me and has given me that strength to continue. And I was finally ordained in 2010 as a deacon, and then 4.5 months later, with a special dispensation, I was ordained a priest on the 11th of September. There was something that was quite unique, I think, and unexpected that happened to me on that day of my ordination. As I was kneeling there and all the priests were laying their hands on my head, a priest came and said, I had my eyes closed. I didn't know who it was. Later I found out who this priest was, and I thanked him. He said to me, Shalom. I started to cry because until that moment I had no peace in my journey, no peace. And I felt something sweep over me and I couldn't stop crying. And all the priests, about 200 priests laying their hands on me, I just kept weeping. I wept because I felt that I don't deserve to be a priest. I can't do this. But in actual fact, looking back, I know that that's who God calls. He calls those who are nothing in this world. And I guess our life is a bit like that, a pilgrimage, because there are moments where we're not in control. And I guess that was what brought me back to God. I wasn't in control of my life. And that I realized that I needed Him. I think it's an incredible gift that God has given to me. And if I ever fail to give thanks for this gift, then I will lose this gift of priesthood. And that's the same with the gift of faith. That if we don't give thanks for our gift of faith, then we'll lose it.
Father, your name is quite unique.
Well, it's very Italian.
It is. What's the meaning behind it?
Oh, well, Aurelio comes from the Latin gold, from the symbol AU. You probably recognise the chemistry symbol. And the Fragapane, a lot of Italians say it in dialect, which would sound like Fragapane, which means to still bread. But I often tell them, no, it's not to still bread. Fraga comes from the Latin frangit, to break bread. So it's Father, break the bread. That's my name. So I'm living up to my name. But it was interesting because I only found the meaning of my surname when I was in the seminary. A priest told me that that's what it meant. And for me, it was sort of like another affirmation or sign that perhaps God is truly calling me to be a priest, to break bread. But that's been my experience, that, you know, I've felt that God has broken me so many times, in the sense that, you know, things go wrong, and it's because I'm always wanting to be in control. And often I've realized that I'm the biggest obstacle to God, and that we are really stopping Him from leading us along the right way. I was saying earlier that it took me 19 years to actually be ordained a priest, from the time that I felt the calling from year 12, where I heard an audio tape of a priest talking about the prodigal son, to the moment that I was ordained a priest.
Did you want to talk about that calling, that tape recording, and how that started your calling to God?
Yeah, well, look, I was going through a real crisis. In year 12, I was going to drop out, and I was just one day that the Christian brother made us listen to this audio tape, and it was Father John Powell, who spoke about the heart of God and the heart of man. There are two audio tapes, and he spoke about his own experience as a priest and his encounter with people who didn't believe in God. I got a copy of the tapes, and I kept listening to them over and over and over again. And it was interesting that no one else in the class really thought much of it. But for me, it actually spoke and answered a lot of my questions. And so I realized that if this priest knows God and loves God, then it's possible for me to know and love God. It's a bit like St. Ignatius of Loyola when he broke his leg and he was reading books on romance and all these worldly books, but it didn't give him any joy, lasting peace. And then he started reading the lives of the saints like St. Francis of Assisi, and he said to himself, you know, if these saints could do it, why couldn't I? And so I started thinking, I want what that priest has. He's got something that I don't have, which is a relationship with God. And I kept thinking to myself, but what have I done wrong? I haven't done anything wrong. I had no awareness of sin in my life. My parents always said that I was a good boy, you know, I was the youngest in my family. I never caused any trouble. But I realized that my sin was that I didn't keep the third commandment, keep holy the Sabbath, to go to church on Sunday. Because it's going to church that we receive that salvation, that we are actually participating in God saving us. We're allowing Him to save us by receiving His body and blood. So that audio tape was very instrumental in my conversion. I realized that God had given me those things and that I had to surrender them to Him. And I felt that once I was able to take that step of surrendering the gifts that He gave me, I could use them for His kingdom and for His purpose, the way He wanted and not the way that I wanted. And surely, like I look over my experience the last 7 years, He has used those gifts. I've been a hospital chaplain for 6.5 years already at Monash Hospital and also St. Vincent's Hospital. 24 hours, 5 days a week on call. And it's been a wonderful ministry that I've been able to grow in because of my experience as a registered nurse and my faith. So I think that was one of the moments that was a determining factor where I just decided that I had to let go. I really felt these words, not spoken, but just in silence in my heart, that God was saying the door to ordination will always be open to you. So I saw the priesthood as an invitation, that I had to come to an acceptance.
Through your struggles, how do you commit to your faith?
Yeah, well, I think the struggles actually help me and remind me of my dependence on God. And that's why I like the devotion to the infant Jesus, because it's all about dependency, a child who depends on their parents. So that's the spiritual childhood that Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus had, that we need to depend on God as our Father and Mary as our mother. And I think it's not to be afraid of one's failings. A priest once told me that holiness is the ability to get up again and again after a fall. And so the more we can understand, or the more I can understand, that I am a broken human being. I'm not perfect. And that the confession is there for everyone. And I think for me, and for a lot of people that I've seen in the confessional is the very sacrament that gives us a bit of a kickstart. And I like to think of it as a spiritual rubbish dump where we can go there anytime, speak to a priest, and just unload all our struggles, all our difficulties, all our failings, and start again. The way that I stay in faith and stay in the priesthood is love. I focus on the cross. The crucifix for me speaks of love, of God who abandoned Himself and became one of us, and that's where I draw my strength from. I draw my strength also from a lot of the pilgrimages I've done. It's quite remarkable, really. In the 7 years that I've been a priest, I've been asked to lead already 5 pilgrimages, and a lot of them are to Marian shrines, but I've done countless other pilgrimages. So I think it's in that vulnerability that we can, that I can stay in faith, to be true to myself, and not to pretend that everything is fine. So when there is a struggle, when there is a problem, I address it. I talk to friends, I talk to priest friends. I like cycling. Cycling for me is a great way for me to think about some of those struggles and just let go. Confession and cycling was the 2 things that actually helped me through one of my biggest struggles in life, where I went through major depression in '94 when I left the missionaries of God's love. And it was just through knowing that I can do something gave me confidence. Just cycling started to give me confidence that I wasn't hopeless, that I could actually achieve something. So it gave me a sense of self-worth and achievement, and confession really became very vital to help me along this path.
What impact, what change is it that you hope to achieve during your time here?
Look, when we're ordained priests, we're asked to sanctify the people of God, but also to ensure our own sanctification. And so for me, I really desire to lead people into prayer. I think if I'm able to lead people into a deeper experience of God and prayer, and even myself. So that's why I've, for the last 5 months that I've been here, we've had adoration for an hour or so before Mass every day with the Rosary. And people are coming, people are responding. And I keep saying to the people that when we pray, we give God permission to act in our life. And it's wonderful. Like, I think all I really want to achieve is this greater love for God and knowledge of God, especially among the children. Because if we're to hand on this faith to the next generation, we need to do it now. And the best way, and the only way, to ensure that there are good Catholic families in the future is to educate and lead children in prayer. So I've got 2 primary schools, St. Clair's Primary School and St. Catherine's Primary School. And from the very first moment, I really knew exactly what I need to do, which is to teach the children to pray. And so I think if we teach children to pray, then, we've taught them everything, because, God will give them everything.
So you really want to inspire the younger generation and, lead that newer generation into the church and into prayer. What else do you hope to achieve with the younger generation in terms of teaching them to prayer? Is there anything else that you want to, bring into their lives?
Definitely. I mean, an experience of community. And just the other week, I've brought together a few young people and some families to start a Young Light Ministry, YLM 3, I call it.
Why 3?
Why 3? Because I started one in Clayton, and then I started one at the cathedral, and now this is my 3rd attempt. But I really believe that by coming with this group of there's about 12 of us, that I'm going to be able to reach out to families. And I think if we're able to reach out to the mothers and the fathers, and educate them, then they will ensure that the faith will be continued in their families. I'd like to instill a sense of religious sort of experience, of devotion to Our Lady, to the Infant of Prague. They're old traditions, but very much alive. They're traditions that are very much part of our Catholic faith, and they speak to the human spirit. See, God became flesh. He became human, and He became one of us, so we're able to see Him. So part of our spirituality is also to be able to see and to touch. And I think, to have a procession, there's something that is quite symbolic in that, because the Israelites were, in the desert for 40 years, and it was in that journey that they became a people. I always think of St. Mary of the Cross, MacKillop, who says, that we are but pilgrims, travellers here on earth. That our true homeland is in heaven.
Thank you for your time, Father. May God bless you on your journey, and all the best of luck with your duties at the parish and with the school and community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of talk in our church today about the new evangelisation, and we might ask, well, what's new about the new evangelisation? One thing that's new is that we're trying to renew the faith in people who should already be Catholic, should already be Christian. Individuals, families, communities, whole cultures that need to rediscover the gospel. And so what's new is that they're getting a new shot in the arm of faith, of evangelisation. Another thing that's new about it is the way that we do that. And the new media and groups like Shalom World TV are very important for bringing the gospel anew to our cultures, to our families, to each of us individually. And so I encourage all the viewers of Shalom World TV, and I encourage Shalom World TV themselves to keep up the good work, to keep watching this channel and to keep up the good work of presenting the Catholic faith to our world today.
Shalom World, God's own channel.